So in today's video, we are going to be talking about why your photos might be looking a bit boring. You might feel that they look just a bit bland, they don't stand out from the crowd. And trust me, I've been there myself, and it did take me quite a while to start to get a bit of recognition for my photography. So very quickly, just before you jump into the video, sign up to my newsletter below. I'll be dropping a London guide soon, and it's a photography guide covering a lot of the elements that we're going to go through today. Also, I talk about locations where you can take some fantastic photos, composition, lighting, lens, gear, kit, the whole shebang. So make sure that you sign up to the newsletter so you'll be first to know when that guide drops. So one of the most common problems that I see beginner photographers make is over relying on the subject matter of the photo. And yeah, don't get me wrong, the subject matter is super important, whether it be your model, whether it be a building, whether it be, a landscape, a tree, a mountain, and so on. It's super important. But just because you have this wonderful location doesn't mean that you're going to come out with a fantastic photo. And on the flip side, you can have a average location, but if you know what you're doing, you can come out with a magnificent photo. So yes, an amazing location is fantastic, but there are a lot of other elements that you need to consider. Your composition, your framing, your lighting, where you're going to stand in relation to that subject matter. Are you going to shoot through something like some leaves, some trees? Are you going to use some foreground elements or not? These all make a huge difference. And then there's the technical side. There's the equipment, there's your camera, the settings, the lens, which lens to use. These are all add up to knowledge, photography knowledge. And when you have this, when you go out and you practice your photography, you pick up certain bits of knowledge and put them into your toolbox so that when you do go to a new location or have a subject or go to a shoot with a client and so on, you know exactly what you're doing to add all these elements together, to use your toolbox and come out with a fantastic photo. So next time you're out doing photography, you're at a beautiful location, you're with a model, you're shooting a product, whatever it might be, take a little bit more time to think about the subject and how you can shoot it in a different way. Can you add some more layers to give that photo a bit more depth? Can you shoot it from a slightly different angle? Do you need to be wider? Do you need to be a little bit closer? Do you need to do a mix of all of these to then give yourself a good body of work? Take a little bit more time. Don't be lazy and just think, oh, that's fantastic. I've got a beautiful model, subject, whatever it might be, and this photo shoot's going to be fantastic. Adding a little bit more thought to your photography will produce a much greater photo. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, just because you're in an average place or not so good looking place and the light isn't fantastic, it doesn't mean that you cannot produce a beautiful image. If you go out, practice, learn photography, all these different elements that we've touched base on, you will get better at photography. You'll have more knowledge in your toolbox so that when you're next out on a shoot, you can get the best out of the location and the environment around you. And the second point I wanted to make is having a subject matter in your photo, in your frame, in your composition really helps to focus the viewer's attention to that subject. It's an anchor point for your frame, for your photo, that grabs the viewer's attention and tells the story of your photo. So if you have a lot of elements in your photo and there's no clear subject, there's no anchor point for your viewer's eyes is basically going to wander all over the frame. They're not going to have leading lines or anything going to that subject. So they're going to get lost and it causes confusion and it basically will not grab your viewer's attention. So having a strong subject matter in your frame is really important. So take a look at this photo here. This is one of the photos I took when I was on my travels around the world. I think this was back in 2017, 2018. I can't remember, something along those lines. And yeah, it's a nice photo, but what it lacks is subject. So what if I told you that I photoshopped the subject out and look, there it is right now. So I'll just pop the subject back in, and you can see straight away, now that the subject's in there, it draws your eye directly to that subject. It gives the frame, the composition, the photo much greater balance, and it grabs the viewer's attention, and you know exactly what the photo is about. It has a strong subject and it has that anchor point, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So even with landscape photography, we want to show off the entire environment where we are, whether it be a mountainside, a hillside, a lake, whatever. Having a strong subject matter in that frame really will help grab the viewer's attention and give the photo much more depth. So it could be anything like a church, a small house, a boat, a person, whatever it might be. Having a subject in the frame really does help. And I tend to like to have one subject. So one boat, one person, one church, one house. I mean, you could be totally different. This is just my personal preference. I think that this minimalist style of photography really helps pull the viewer's attention in and simplifies what the photo is about. So another reason why your photos might be looking a bit boring is because they lack depth. Now, depth is magical when it comes to photography. It really helps draw your viewer's attention from the front of the frame to the back of the frame. It adds a whole load of context to your image and your composition, and it really helps with storytelling. Now, of course, not every photo needs depth. Some minimalist style photos, they do not need depth at all. And if you've got a strong subject, maybe you don't need depth. Everything is contextual, so it just totally depends on your environment. But generally speaking, if you do add depth to your photo, adding layers to your photo, it just elevates that frame, that composition. It shows that environment in a totally different light. So one way you can add more depth into your scene is to take a step back and add some foreground elements. So if you're doing street photography, you could use a lamppost, a wall, a side of a car, a bonnet, a shop sign. There's so many things on the streets that we could use. If you're in a landscape environment, you could use a tree, the tree trunk, some leaves, some flowers, and so on. You can help frame that image and make it look totally different to as if you were just shooting it flat. And if you're in a totally open environment, you might not have so many things that you can add to the scene. There might not be any bushes or so on. What you can do, you can lower yourself to the ground and use your ground as a foreground and shoot through the grass, for example, or the road or the pavement or wherever it might be. Another trick that you could use, you can use your hand. Let's say you're doing a portrait shoot. You can put your hand out in front of the lens, or you can use some leaves that you've grabbed or some grass that you grabbed and hold it in front of the lens and shoot through those elements. It will add a whole different element to the scene. Now take a look at this example here. I was shooting with a model and we were on a staircase. So you can see this image here, I'm just shooting flat. And yeah, it's a nice image. She's posing nice, the lighting looks nice and so on. But I just took a step to the left and then I shot through these railings. And you can see it's added a layer. You can't tell that they're railings because it's so close to the lens and it's blurred out. It just adds a whole different layer and more interest. It elevates the picture, elevates the frame and makes the photo look totally different and much better in my opinion. So look at them side to side. One is just totally flat, straight on, and one I'm shooting through the railing. So wherever you are, whatever type of photography you're doing, whether it be product, whether it be portrait, whether it be landscape, just try to change your angle. Try to think outside the box. Try to add some more layers in front and behind the subject, and your photos will be elevated to a whole new level. And another element that you can add to your photography that will make it more interesting is leading lines. Leading lines will draw the viewer's attention to the subject. It will draw the viewer's attention through your frame and make your frame look way more interesting than if there were no leading lines there at all. So whenever I'm out and I'm doing photography, I'm looking for all of these elements. I'm looking for a strong subject. Then I'm looking to see if I can use layers to make that subject, that frame more interesting. And if I can add leading lines and other photography elements and tools and tricks that I picked up from over the years, These all add up to lift my photo out of the norm and make it stand out from the crowd. Another little trick that you can use is opening up your aperture. So dropping your aperture to the lowest number possible for your given lens. So my 50mm is a 1.2 for example, but some of my lenses only go to a 2.8. Whatever it might be, drop it down to a low aperture, open it wide so you get lots of light, and then when you're shooting your subject, taking that photo, you'll see that your subject will stand out from the background. It will be more blurred. The background will be more blurred, your subject will be in focus, the foreground will be blurred, and it will add more visual interest to your photo. But a word of warning, do be careful when you're opening up your lens and letting in lots of light. Dropping into a low f-stop like a 1.4 or a 2.8, whatever it might be. Just because your lens goes down to a 2.8 or a 1.4 doesn't mean that you want to be using that f-stop all the time. We want to know where our subject is in the environment. So dropping it right down, it could totally blow out the foreground, totally blow out the background. So it's so blurry, we don't even know the environment that the subject's in. So play around, do an f4, do an f6, do an f8, and see how blurry and unblurry you can get that background, because we want to know exactly where our subject is in the environment. So take a look at these portraits that I've taken. You can see that they've been taken in London because you can see the background and the environment around the person that I was taking a picture of. Now, if I dropped my f-stop all the way down and my background was super blurry, which is a mistake that I see a lot of beginners make, especially when it comes to portrait photography, you wouldn't have a clue where this person is. So having that environment around your subject is a fine balance, and it's something that you'll need to get used to. Go out, practice, get that camera, get that lens, start shooting, and you'll understand your tools a lot better. So another reason why your photos are looking a bit boring and not standing out from the crowd are maybe because you're over editing. I've seen this a lot with beginner photographers and even intermediate photographers. They've got this brand new camera, they've got this amazing lens, and they've got these new tools on Lightroom or whatever your photo editing software might be, and they're over editing. So they're over sharpening, they're making the skies look super saturated, super blue, they're making the greens look amazingly green, and it just looks unrealistic. These days, because of AI and all of these digital photos that are coming out, everybody's producing photos and a lot of people are over editing. We want natural looking things, whether that will be product photography, landscape photography, car photography, architecture, property, portrait photography. Try and make your photos look natural, and they will look way more realistic, and they'll grab the viewer's attention because they look normal. They're not looking like some photo that's been edited by AI. We're human. We want connection. We want connection with our photography and our photos and the subject. So having imperfections in your photography makes it look normal. And you know, film photography has made a great comeback at the moment. Film photography cameras are going up in price, and I think that's because people are starting to get fed up of this digital style of photography, these over edited photos, and that retro sort of film look with lots of grain that is looking a bit flat, that the colors are not looking so amazing, is almost nostalgic. It's real life. And people really like that. So don't worry if you're framing slightly off or if something's overexposed or underexposed. Your photo can still tell an amazing story. And if you look at some of the most famous photographers in the past, their photos are not perfect. It's all about the environment, the story, the subject, all the little elements that make that photo look and feel great, that make the viewer escape their reality and go into that photo and feel it for themselves. So something that I do when I'm taking portraits is in Lightroom, is to drag in a overlay, like a dust or a speckle overlay, just like you can see here. And it's super easy to do. Just drag it in, drop the opacity, and you've got this amazing photo. And it just adds a simple layer, it adds a lot more depth and a lot more reality to the photo, and it helps lift your image to another level. Now you can get dust and scratches overlays, you can get lens flares, you can get all sorts of stuff. If you click below on my newsletter, sign up and you can get these for free. Now, another reason why your photography is not standing out from the crowd is because you have a lack of planning. Now, it depends on your subject, of course. When we're doing street photography, obviously you can't plan. You're just out and you're reacting to the environment that you come across. You're exploring the city and finding things of interest, and when you do, you take photos of them. But on the other hand, if you're doing landscape photography, planning out your shoot is super important, because where you're going, the time of day, the lighting is 80-90% of your photo. There's no point in turning up in the middle of the day, midday, when the sun is at the highest point in the sky. You want to be at your location early in the morning when it's sunrise and nice and soft, or sunset and you've got golden hour. It's going to make a huge difference. So planning your photography makes a massive difference when it comes to capturing something that is going to stand out from the crowd. Another type of photography where you need to plan is portrait photography. Now, I've done a lot of portraits, and planning where you're going to go, your environment, is really important. Planning what time of day you're going to be there is very important. Planning what sort of outfits your client is going to wear, what sort of poses they're going to do. This is all really important, and it all needs to be planned out accordingly. You need to have things in place so that when you go to the shoot, you know exactly what you're doing. Also, when you know exactly what you're doing as a photographer, you're telling your model where to pose, how to pose, what's coming up next, what we're going to do, having a bit of fun with the model as well. It really helps build confidence in the shoot, in yourself, and in your model. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this video up there. I hope these tips really do help you out. Do pay attention to them, add them to your photography, make sure you plan, add layers, play around with your camera, make sure you know your camera and lens setup like the back of your hand. That's another little bonus tip that I'll leave you with. Sign up to the newsletter, I'll be dropping that guide out soon, and until the next time, get out there and take those photos.